everybody. Welcome back to the Wombynhood Illuminated podcast. I'm joined today by the beautiful Stephanie McGuinness, who is a wellbeing therapist. And the reason, Stephanie, that we call you a wellbeing therapist is because you have a ridiculous amount of qualifications.
Yes, I do. No, we joke.
Like myself, an advocate of learning, always.
Always.
Yes.
Yep. And that's it. And it's that combination of the clinical, Western, sort of formal therapies, and then also the alternative, non-conventional, but equally beneficial alternative complementary therapies.
Love it. So before we begin, because there's a lot to cover, folks, because Stephanie has a wealth of knowledge. So what I wanted to ask you is, what started you on your healing journey, as in stepping into healing work? How did it begin for you?
So my aspirations when I was a young person was to be an air hostess. That was my dream and aspiration. So everything I had set up was about traveling, adventure, and just living a full life. And then me and some of my very best friends, and they're still my very best friends now, went when we were young, so we didn't drive and we'd got a taxi. We had come back to the town that I live in. And as we were walking through the street, we were just walking up. And do you know, you get kind of like a funny intuition, a funny feeling in your tummy, and you're like, there's something. And we just walked down this alley. So like, again, an open space, but this alley. And there was a lady who had just jumped and hung herself.
Oh my God.
And instinctively, I ran up and just grabbed her feet. And again, it was completely instinctively. I'm not trained. I was maybe 16, 17.
Oh my God.
And lifted her up by her feet. So she just jumped as kind of the same thing kind of coincided. And we got her just kind of in the nick of time, and went over and held her up and I just said, like, why are you doing this? And again, suicide was not a thing where I live. I mean, it's more prevalent now, but then, like, we're talking almost 30 years ago, that was not as commonplace. And so my sister and my two friends went to ring the emergency services, and they actually ran to the police station, and I was like, 5 minutes, tell me why you want to die, and in 5 minutes I'll just like move my hands. So I'd held her up and was holding her body weight against my hands, and again, it was much younger, much smaller, and a wee light frame, and she was so distressed, and she's like, and she just kept repeating, I just want to die, it needs to end. And I was like, yep, but just tell me why. Give me a reason why this is your time. So as we kind of talked through, and she was really distressed, and she had a conflict with her daughter and other different things, then the police came on side, the ambulance and the fire brigade, and she was crying and talking, and as it kind of progressed, then she said, I want to live. And then obviously the firemen came, got her down, she was checked over. She was taken to the hospital for like further tests, and the police officer said to me, I don't know who you are and I don't know what you do, but whatever you do, you need to work with people. And I remember just thinking, but who wouldn't do that?
Yeah.
And like who wouldn't try and save someone's life? And I didn't think I'm going to save her life. I just thought,
well, you're going to try and intervene, of course.
Yeah, because everyone can feel better. Do you know what I mean? And there's and then I remember going into school and telling my teacher, and like obviously telling other people, but I told my teacher, and she was like, and I was like, what do you think? About like this happened at the weekend, and as you know, one of the teachers you really respect and you kind of have good rapport with, and she was like, I'm so excited about your future, Stephanie. I can't wait to see what you do. And then she made me write it down in a wee note and put it in the science lab into the prep room, and she was like, you're going to come back and you're going to tell me that you're a therapist. And I was like, but and even then I was like, but I still want to be an air hostess. And she's like, you will never be an air hostess. You have so much to give. And that was the start of it. And then obviously then I applied to university and I studied psychology, and then that started like a 15-year relationship with education and training.
Wow. So you went to uni then, and you studied psychology. So my brother studied psychology as well, and I know it's not the kind of qualification. You're not a psychologist once you study psychology. There's more years after that. Did you go on to become a psychologist, or what did you do after studying psychology?
So once I'd finished my degree, I then went back and I did a master's in applied psychology, mental health,
Right.
and research. And then I went back and I did a master's in psychotherapy and CBT. And then I obviously worked in that arena and practiced in that arena and worked with like predominantly children and young people. I worked with offenders and I worked in mental health services as well. And I suppose during that time, what really struck me was the amount of young people in terms of the life course and in terms of trauma, in terms of intervention, and when can we make a real impact. So then I went and did a master's in social work to again just understand a bit further and to kind of infiltrate the system and put interventions in place so we could prevent trauma rather than wait and work at a later stage, because I was predominantly working again with adults.
This experience that you had at 17, I mean, Jeekers, just to go back to that is huge to come across that. That's, I can't even imagine. And I know what you're saying. You think, who wouldn't do that? But I know of another story of someone else in my life who shared like coming across a house fire, and like two guys, and one of them ran in and the other one didn't. And it's like fight or flight. Not everybody. It's interesting because not, you would think, who's not going to intervene? But there are people, their response to that situation is that they wouldn't. Not because they don't want to, but just in the moment, their survival instinct takes over and they can't. So it's incredible that you did that as well. But was it just that took you on the trajectory, or was there other things happening in your life that kind of made you think, you know what, trauma work is something I'm interested in? So Stephanie and I obviously know each other very well. Stephanie's my soul sister. And so I know about a lot of the work that you do. And I am making a point to remember to mention these things to you all folks, because you just, whenever you know a person, it's easy to forget to mention those things. But trauma work is something that you know, have dipped your toe, well, not dipped your toe, you've swam in it. Like, but I know for me, for my own experience with trauma work, where it came from was my own life story. I'm assuming you're the same.
Yeah. So I suppose, and that's interesting because at the time, and it took quite a long time, sort of after, before I realised that my own experience as a young person. So my daddy passed away when I was 4, and we had a very conventional, normal life. And then all of a sudden, I had a daddy who was very young, who died of a massive heart attack. I had a mother who was then a widow. I had like a brother and a sister, and we were all under like three children under 4. My sister was a month. There was a lot going on, and when I think about that dynamic and how my family responded to it, we have a wonderful family unit, but we have really good external support from both families. So both my mummies and my daddies, but obviously then they've lost like their child, they've lost their
brother.
Yeah. So all those things, and our response was to pretend that it never happened. And I didn't really realise until probably during my training when we were talking about like attachment and social learning and, you know, things that you go through. And I didn't really I was like, this is my family, this is my normal family, this is normal to me. And then when I thought about it, I was like, gosh, that was huge. That's a huge thing. Yeah. And I suppose maybe then, like, why am I interested in children, and why am I interested in young people, and why do I want to get in early? And then when I think about, and I peel those layers back, I'm like, because actually there was a whole lot of trauma in that wee child, in terms of my Stephanie, in terms of my family story, and in terms of my inner child that I still work on to this day. You know, I think trauma is one of those things that we can learn so much from, and then it becomes resilience. It becomes not our story, but it becomes part of our armor, how we can actually move forward in this life and support ourselves and support those around us.
I love that. Your armor. It's like you become your own white knight. It's your inner resources, isn't it? Like getting your own toolkit. Yeah. And your training has given you a lot of that. Yeah, and I think it's that process of unfolding. You know, I think anybody can sit and say, these are all the wonderful things that have happened to me, and these are all the not so wonderful things that have happened to me. But we don't often, in terms of, again, just sort of connecting in and grounding to who we are right now. Things can be irritating me in this moment. And why is that irritating me right now? Is that a right now thing, or is that something historical? And again, when I think about trauma, it's about,
okay, so the more I understand, the more that I know, the more like tools I have in my kit, the more I can help and preserve myself, but also the more I can disseminate out and support others to actually help them heal from their trauma.
I love it. So we have the degree, and we've gone on and done the masters. So you mentioned that you had been working with young people, and what kind of a arena was that? What was your...
So again, in a variety of different sort of capacities. So I worked in I've worked in probation hostels with very high risk offenders. So again, that was about like murderers, sex offenders, and high risk pedophiles. Then I worked with children who were in the care system. So again, they had been maybe they were in the foster care system, they were in the kinship system, but they were in the care system. I also worked with a lot of children that were in the at-risk category. So they were in services, and it was more prevention and therapeutic. And then I worked obviously in mainstream social services and with a number of different trusts. And then as part of my degree sort of process, I worked for the Northern Health and Social Services Board for, I think it was 18 months, on a paid placement year that I had to qualify for it and then apply for the post. And in that time, then I got to see what way does the trust actually work in relation to funding, how do we plan services, and how do we properly make interventions. So I was able then to go up and do different pieces of work with Stormont and with MLAs and start advocating for services that then were not really on the map.
Wow. Knowing you, I just really want to pull this out because Stephanie is like the queen of research. And it's like, this all makes so much sense. Why, like, even before you would even come on here tonight, it's like, oh, I need to remember X, Y, and Z. There's like notes upon notes of research, you know, even though you're already this wealth of knowledge, but we're funny beings, aren't we? Human beings, like, we still doubt ourselves, like, but it just makes so much sense that this is something that you were passionate about. Oh, by the way, folks, the Scrambler is back. For those of you that have listened to other episodes where our wee neighbour is out in a Scrambler that he got for Christmas. Just a wee disclosure there if you hear out in the background. But so that's incredible that you were involved in like creating legislation and stuff like that. That's really cool. And we're talking about the Western Trust, which is, aren't we? And Northern Trust. For those of you that don't live in Ireland or Northern Ireland, they're kind of our governing bodies for health, really, and well, everything by the government, aren't they, right? In a nutshell. So after that, then, so I'm hearing, I understand now the more clinical modalities that you've been working with, trauma work and that, but you and I know each other through a different capacity, which is the holistic side of things. I mean, how do you find the marrying of those two worlds?
So I suppose in terms of coming into, so my mother, I suppose I should just do a shout out to my mummy. My mummy is a very, very open woman. So from a very young age, she would have, she'd been like, what are we grateful for? Like, again, before mindfulness and gratitude and journaling was a thing, like my mummy was using the language without having any training or awareness of it. And so she was like, we'll go and do this and we'll look at crystals. And, you know, she would have been really, really spiritual and it could just kind of made like all of us be open to exploring sort of spirituality. But I suppose then when I did go down the research route, when I did go down the clinical training, I was like, what's the evidence base? What's the evidence base? What's the law? What's the policy? You know, and probably lost that for a wee bit. But when I was working in the Western Trust, I met the most beautiful woman, and she kept saying to me, Stephanie, you need to do some, like, I want to train you in Reiki. I want to do Reiki training. And she kept saying it and kept saying it and kept saying it. Kept coming back to it, and I was like, but I'm like,
skeptic.
Where's the risk?
Not for me. Where's the research?
Where's the risk assessment? You know, like, what's the assessment of need? Where's the, you know, and again, I suppose just in terms of like that, even that modality, there's a lot of research coming out now in terms of energy, psychology, so that's wonderful. But then again, like, because I'm kind of that old, it was a really long time ago. So then she kept saying it, kept saying it, and kept saying it. And then she said, Stephanie, and she was like, with consent, do you mind if I put my hands on you? And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I was like, I love getting massaged, I love getting facial, whatever that means. And she did a treatment on me, and I was blew my mind.
Wow.
In terms of the way that my body responded, the actual relaxation that I felt, and all of the thoughts that were coming up. You know, so a lot of the things that kind of came up in that session was trauma things. So it was things that I was like, oh, I know that. Why is this now making my stomach churn? And so even though I'd done the supervision and work in my way, sort of work through it energetically, it was still living inside my body. So then I was like, oh, and now I'm curious. What's this? And then she was like, here's some textbooks, because she knew this is how you work. Yeah. And she's like, read that, and when you're ready. And she was a Reiki master, and again, she's smashing woman. And she was like, let's do this. And then she was like, but you'll come to me when you're ready. And then I was like, okay, let's go. And that was the start of the journey. And I suppose when I think about my holistic journey, that is how it has been. All my teachers have unfolded themselves to me at different times and different ways for different things. Do you know? And again, my spiritual community has grown greatly. And I really like people who are very authentic. I like people that believe in the modalities, but I also, again, am very much into what's the evidence? What's the evidence? How do we ensure that we have something in the mainstream that people can actually tap into? And so we're taking sort of Western or alternative modalities, and we're bringing them into our already very good Western system. Yeah, that is wonderful, but it is not the whole package.
Well, it's outdated, isn't it? Like, this is something that you and I share a passion in. Like, I remember at the beginning of my journey, I was 17, and at this stage in the trajectory, if you want to hear more about my story, listen back a few podcasts. But at 17, my friend bought me my first deck of angel cards. And that really opened me up even more, because she knew I was mad about angels and already communicating with angels. And this was a gift that she gave me. And I remember going into the local franchise bookstore, Eason's it was at the time, and there being one shelf of self-help and spiritual books, literally one. That was it. And now when you go in, it's a whole section, but literally, when I say one bookshelf, by the way, I mean like one set of shelves, like one tiny, like say 3 shelves of stuff, if you know what I mean, but just one tiny part. And now it's like a whole, it's a huge industry now. It's growing so much. But what I have always been interested in as well is this, like, how do you really substantiate something that is intuition and is about the wildness, the wild body, and that to me is what spirit is all about, is like your wild body. Do you know what I mean? Your wild intuition and all the rest. How do you really evidence that? And yet there are people like Dr. Joe Dispenza. I would recommend him. Like, he is evidencing the mysterious, the mystical, and the most sacred. And there is this crossover, like, I've talked about this in a previous episode with Jason about how, you know, we're photons of light, and how if you spoke to a scientist at the Hadron Collider, they would be like, if you were talking about your light body to them, they'd be like, yeah, of course, yeah, because that's science. You know, there's this crossover. But one of my concerns has always been, I'm just wondering, are you the same? And I think you are. Is that in this arena of what we do, I think the reason both of you and I come from a kind of academic background as much as studying the holistic side of things, but how important ethically and morally it is with these holistic modalities to ground them in having like a governing body and having an ethical framework, and like what you one of the things you said a moment ago was like risk assessment.
So important.
And there's so many brilliant people doing exceptional work, and let's face it, we're the wounded healers, as we say. You know, the reason you've just said, like, the reason you got into this work is the trauma. your own trauma. It mightn't have been aware to you to begin with, but this kind of takes you on this journey, and I know it's my own as well. And when you're wounded, sometimes, depending on where you're at in the journey, I suppose, too, there are people, I suppose, I have encountered, and I'm sure you have too, where it's just not been safe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's a really good point. And that is something I'm incredibly passionate about, is the actual training. So how are you trained? Who are you trained by? Who governs that? Like, are you insured? Is there a risk assessment? Are you thinking holistically about that person's well-being? Because there's so many therapies out there where it's, you know, it's an exchange, and I mean, they're trained in something that is beneficial, but in terms of that person, if you're in a session with me for an hour and you have other health conditions, or you have any other psychological conditions, or there's additional stressors out there, and you're putting that person back into their world, and you haven't considered the risks of that person coming in the first instance, and then in terms of the aftercare and the follow-up. And I mean, whenever I talk, like when I think about psychological therapies and other interventions that we use sort of more in the mainstream, like there is a care pathway. It is not a process where you jump in, do a treatment and you're gone. You're actually on a pathway, and there is a group of people, or there's a group of very specialist people that are interested and are tracking that for you, and you actually have a direct communication back to them. And I think when I think about, again, sort of alternative and holistic and complementary therapies, that is so important. That communication isn't well, you were with me for an hour, or you were with me for an hour and a half, or you did 3 sessions, but actually that process, that ethical process and that care process then starts to move into alternative therapies. And then we can, again, in terms of tracking it, in terms of energetics and in terms of mapping and all the science, but actually then we have this framework of practice that we are no longer just offering a treatment, like in terms
of standalone. And because I know with, like, I'm trained in reflexology and body work, and I've been trained in as you know, a couple of different modalities of body work with tantra and with my womb work, and it's just, I really notice the difference depending on what kind of body work you're doing. To me, it's kind of, I personally, this is just my own viewpoint, is I find it a bit scary sometimes, the lack of framework around some of these modalities, because to me it's not safe. And for me to be safe as a practitioner, the only way it can be a safe space is if it's safe for both people. And to me, the way I guarantee your safety is through the research, through the right framework, through the right support being wrapped around me and you. And that is, like, this is the thing, folks, and the reason I'm bringing this up in conversation is because Steph and I have talked about this before, because we've both been in healing spaces where afterwards we were like, that did not feel safe, guys, you know. And when you're doing this kind of work, when you're doing trauma work, and let's face it, if it's something as simple as a body massage, there is an element of doing trauma work there, because you're dealing with the physical, you're rubbing out knots. That's physical trauma in the body manifesting in that way. And it could be from lifting weights, or it could be because you're stressed to the nines. And if you're stressed to the nines, that's your body's holding on to something. That is a form of trauma. And we have an ethical responsibility to make sure that that person leaves the space even keeled, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, with a lot of the more holistic or alternative, inverted commas, modalities, that framework isn't there. You know, when you start going into energetics work and even some of the deeper body work, like tantra, for example, and you know, it's a bit concerning, but we're both very passionate about ensuring that in our work anyway, that's not the case, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose just on that note, I suppose whenever you're in this field and you're connecting, even having this conversation where we're talking about risk assessment, we're talking about assessment of need, we're talking about care pathways, we're talking about aftercare. I mean, even just to put that out there on this platform,
yes,
is possibly going to trigger other people to then think, oh gosh, like what is that?
yep.
And within that, I know, like in terms of like my practitioner group of like I would say my peers, like you, and different wonderful people that I work with, like they all have all of those formats. We come together, we talk about things, again, in terms of confidentiality, we keep that in a safe space, but we're talking about things that are coming up. We are supervising each other. We're holding each other to the same high level expectations that we would in our other practices, you know? And
absolutely.
I think, again, if you are feeling that like that risk, or this is not a safe space, or, you know, I mean, there's something about not disclosing things. You know, you have a personal responsibility not to share in that space, but I think there's something about that, even in terms of the feedback, ethically, that you would go back and you would say, look, I'm a wee bit concerned, and I know that you've done it, and I've done it in different times, where we went back to the practitioner and said, look, I'm really concerned, I'm really worried about blah 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? Or alternatively, I've been in sessions where I've had I'm trying to think what that wee thing is, you know, the wee pocket key of mental health services, and like I would always have them about my person, where I'm like, do you know what, I heard what you said, and like, no judgment, but this might be a useful resource, you know. So I'm not offering any wisdom or guidance, but I'm just saying, put that in your bag, because I think that might be something that you definitely need.
Like, because realistically, when you go into these spaces and you're working with people, and you're working with either emotionally, physically, or spiritually, you know, and you're working with trauma, you have, like we've talked about before, you can only go as deep as you've gone yourself. Like, you can only hold space for what you've worked through, you know what I mean? Well, not that you've worked through, but the shadow in you is reflected in the caliber of the shadow in the client, and what you can hold for them, if that makes sense. And realistically, these are vulnerable spaces, and these are vulnerable people, and we when we go, myself included, when I've gone to these spaces, and you're going because you need to be held, and you need to feel safe to be held. And it's just, I suppose, I've been part of many healing circles and group events, and even just something, I know this is really strange, but you know, myself and you have both worked in that more like the mainstream network, so there has to be a ratio of people to one person, and in some of these events it's like one person to like 30 people, and I'm going, how can you possibly hold space for this many people? Obviously it's about, like, again, you can say it's about the level of the depth that you're going, but you just never know what opens for somebody and where they're at in their journey. And I just feel like it's a really important note, and the reason I'm bringing it up is just for those of you that are going to start seeking out or have sought out healing services through any kind of capacity at all. It can be as simple as reflexology, you know. It's so important that you have due diligence for yourself, because like Stephanie, you hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, the responsibility for your safety lies with you, you know. So when you're walking into a space, it is ask for somebody's credentials, you know what I mean? Now, there are things that, like, there's healing work and stuff that is intuitive, and the person is an intuitive worker, and they maybe don't have anything on the wall, so to speak. But those are the kind of people that the caliber of their work speaks for itself through the many people that they've worked with, and you probably find them through word of mouth. It's not something that's, do you know what I mean? I've met many a gifted healer that's just their natural aptitude, but they carry with them that ethical framework and how they work, and they're so compassionate and aware. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But anyway, off on a tangent.
But a good tangent.
It is a good tangent, and the reason I suppose that I also bring it is because I love how you've married that into your holistic work. Can we talk a wee bit about that?
Yes.
She's like,
yeah. So as I said, like I started off, my journey started with the Reiki, and then with the same beautiful woman, I went through my Reiki 1, Reiki 2, up to my master's level. I have been practicing that for so many years, and then sort of on the back of that, she was an AET master, and then opened that modality to me. I didn't do my training with her, but I did it with someone else, but I didn't do it straight away. So I was like, oh, what's this? Why is that different?
What
How
is
that
IET?
So it's integrated energy therapy. So so again, you were talking about angel work. So what you're doing is you're calling in the archangels, and they are like your spirit army around you for that treatment. So what you'll do when you're doing IET is you do hand positions. And then as you do the hand, I don't know if that was me or me.
That's me.
But as you do the hand positions, then there are certain things that you release. So as you are on the hand position, you're releasing at the different sort of points within the body system, and then you're calling in. But at all times, I would say the healer, that's, you know, the person, the physical person who's performing the exercise is only the human channel between the angel realm and that person's.
They're the channel.
Yeah. So, and again, I think that's an important distinction. You know, healers are not healers.
Yes.
They are a channel for an energetic expression. But again, it's up. And what I love about, again, Reiki and about IET is that the body will only take what it is capable of taking. So you're not going to be flooded with more healing or more trauma or more thoughts than your own psychological and physical body can take. So it's gentle, and again, because you're the channel, it's coming from higher levels outside of us, and again, there's lots of research in terms of there's lots of research around the use of these modalities now, like before surgery. So where they're bringing in energy therapies when people are getting ready to be put under, so before anesthetic, and then in terms of the recovery rates, the levels of infection, and so again, there's a body of evidence that actually, in terms of the medical model of even performing surgery, that it's having such a profound effect on the body system, getting the body ready for the trauma that is the surgery, and then helping the body with the trauma that was having the surgery. So there's lovely things that are happening. So that's what IET is. And then, so then I do other lovely things. Again, sort of maybe more in sort of that in between, not sort of CBT and psychotherapy, but where I would do NLP. So I'm an NLP practitioner.
And what is NLP?
So it is Neuro-linguistic programming. So it is about how you as a person are communicating with yourself, and how the way that you speak to yourself is programming the way you experience this life.
Okay.
So a really lovely technique in NLP is about thinking about, and this is something actually that my husband says all the time, and this is his like well-being statement. He's like, whose side are you on? So whenever you have that negative thought jumping in, he would say, whose side are you on? Or sometimes if like I'm being particularly negative about myself, he'll say, don't speak about my wife like that. You're offending me. And so in NLP, what that does is that anchors you to this moment. And then there's a technique that we use, and it's called the first, second, and third person. So in the first person, how am I speaking to myself? What words am I using? What thought patterns am I using? What is going on inside me in this moment? And it might be like, again, a stress with a relationship, a stress with work, a stress with family. It could be anything. So what am I saying to myself internally in my dialogue? And then it's catching that in that moment. So in the second person, then we step out. So we physically move the body, and we then move away. So if it was me, I'm stepping away from Stephanie, and I'm looking at Stephanie as a compassionate friend, a compassionate family member. And how are they speaking to Stephanie about that incident? So if that's the work stress, the family stress, the relationship stress, whatever it is, what are they saying? Are they saying the same language patterns? Or are they saying something different? And so what you do then is you start then to challenge your own psyche, because obviously you're the first person because you're having the thought, and then you're the second person because you're being compassionate to yourself, and you would see yourself. Like again, so that's why you move in the distance. And then the third person is someone detached, so somebody like maybe a colleague that has no emotional sort of investment in you as a person, or a lay person. How do they perceive that situation? So they're asking a different set of questions, which means your psyche is perceiving the stress in a very different way.
Yes.
Then when you move back into the first person, so moving back into your body, then what happens is that the language patterns that you're using in your own head, all of a sudden are like, oh, well, actually, maybe I'm going to ask for support. Maybe I'm going to say no. Maybe I'm going to be a bit more assertive. Maybe I'll boundary. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not a failure. Actually, I'm just a human being. So NLP is really good in terms of it's a really good motivational tool. It's really good for changing the way that you are communicating with yourself. But it's also a really effective way if something's coming up in the future. So if I'm going to have that difficult conversation, if I anticipate that I am going to take this sort of job opportunity and I want to, so you can use, and again, NLP is, there's so many tools within NLP that as a practitioner that we would select, and then we would work through it. And then what you do is you do it live with the person. You embed that practice into their toolkit, and then you give them homework. So they go off, similar to CPT, where they would go off and they have to practice it, use it, and then give you feedback.
Amazing.
You know, so what you're trying to do then is again go back to that, adding to the toolkit. That is my entire philosophy in terms of well-being, again, in my mainstream and in my alternative, is what can I teach you, what can I share with you that you're going to be able to use in the session and outside, and actually pass that forward. So that's a lovely one.
There's a brilliant takeaway from this episode for you folks. That in itself is a resource, what you've just shared. Like, I know I can think of it for myself and be like, okay, the next time I'm going to be like, I am fucking stupid, or I'm giving myself a hard time for doing something, I'm going to be able to drop in and be like, step back into, literally physically step back out of the situation and look at where I was standing and what I was feeling, and compassionately speak to myself and be like, oh no, come on now.
Yeah, and you will know, like whenever you're in that, if you're doing an exercise with a client, what you know, very quickly they know who their compassionate people are. Like, they're not going to pick their negative sister. You know, they will. You're like, okay, I want you now to think about somebody in your life that makes you feel calm, that makes you feel supported. Then their psyche says, oh, here you go, here's the name, this is my, and then so your own psyche will tell you who your second person is and who your third person is, and you can keep going back and back and back, if you know, you can go as many people as you want, but generally if you kind of bounce between the first, second and third person, very quickly the things that are so real and so dense and so scary right now, all of a sudden it's like, well, actually now I have more options. And that's what NLP does. It opens up options of thought, so that we're no longer living in the limbic system, we're no longer living in the amygdala, and actually that basic survival of, oh my gosh, like I'm like fight or flight, that then is like, oh, hang on, now we move back into our higher functioning human brain, then we go back to critical thinking, problem solving, rational thinking, and the oxygen then is going through the entire brain and not flooded to our stress center.
One place, yeah. It's like you're creating a little family systemic therapy in your own head. Like, do you know what I mean? You're resourcing yourself in your own mind, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that it takes you out of your present, because at the end of the day, that's, you know, a version of a truth, or you think it's a version of a truth. I mean, you're trying to find the evidence to support that, but that's bringing you out to go, well, actually, is there evidence to support that though? Because, you know, what is it they say? Whether you're right or wrong, you can find the episode. You can find the evidence to support whatever you believe. You know what I mean? Especially Google these days. Literally, you can find the evidence to support anything for yourself. But it's great to challenge that. I love that.
Yeah, and that's a lovely one just to have. And like, again, if this kind of resonates with you or resonates with anybody on the podcast, even just to have that, like, even in your purse or your wallet. So like, even write yourself like 3 questions. Like, how am I feeling in this moment? Like second person, how can I support you in this moment? And then the third question is, how would I perceive this moment for you? And what can I do? Do you know what I mean? And so, like, just to have like
just
that
removes you, and then by the time you get to the third person, you're going, all right, okay, this is not as life and death as I think it is in that first initial my moment of reaction. Yeah.
Do you know, and again, even sort of picking up on your language patterns. So like, you were saying about, you know, we can find the evidence, negative or positive, but actually as humans, we're hardwired to receive the negative. Feed me, which is why when we get a lot of compliments, we're like, well, and we minimize it. We respond, we distract, we
deflect. Yeah.
Whereas again, in terms of, think about the language that you use in your own head. How do you speak to you? And very quickly, in terms of, again, if you're thinking about your internal dialogue and you're thinking about your self-esteem and your self-worth, think about whenever you look at yourself. Again, like a lovely exercise that Louise Hay talks about is a mirror exercise, where you look at yourself through compassionate eyes and you ask that person the question, but you don't even need to look at your eyes really. But if you think about that person, what do you say to yourself? And would you say that to your mummy, to your sister, to your best friend? And if you wouldn't, then you shouldn't be saying it to yourself. And that's difficult in the first instance to kind of, to move from, this is the way that I've been culturally programmed, this is the way I've been like programmed because of my gender, because of my religion, because of my education. But actually, if we start to change the way that we think about ourselves, very quickly that ripple then moves out into our communities, and people start to see us in different light because we're communicating with ourselves, and that emanates in terms of our, like you were talking about light bodies, that emanates through the light body, where other people are going to say, gosh, you look amazing, oh look at, you know, and they're saying very lovely positive things about you, and you're like, oh, I can hear that now, because that's how you're speaking to yourself. Whereas if you're saying, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm like exhausted, and whatever things that you were,
the I am, the power of the I am statement.
And so we just change that, and it could be like, and like one of the lovely things I like to do with mindfulness is, I don't need to tell you why I'm wonderful. I am is enough. So what I do is, and this is just a daily practice. So as I walk up any kind of steps, I just put my foot on and say, I am, and I think about myself from the most vulnerable person in my life, in terms of who. I don't mean vulnerable as in like, I mean vulnerable as in, I was thinking about my niece. That's who my wee person is. Yeah. And I think about all the things that she thinks about me. And every time I take a step, I think about all the most beautiful things that she says to me all of the time. All of the beautiful things that I say to her. The things that she says to her mummy. That she says to my mummy. That she says about her friends. And in that I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful. But in that, every time I take a step, it's only a positive step.
I love that. And the bit that I really love most about that is that you're saying about feeling it, you're embodying it. It's resonating on every level of your being. So because we can think these things, but thinking it and feeling it, I mean, that's how we pull anything in. That's how we manifest. That's how this becomes our reality, that you actually feel that you are that thing. It's because you feel that you are, you know what I mean? It's the body and the energetics of the body. I love that because I have I am statements in lots of different places, like in passwords and stuff. I shouldn't maybe say that on air. But obviously there's not just like I am Ruth, guys, so you can't hack me. But I have I am statements, and I always do a capital I and a capital A in my I am statements. I do it even when I'm writing things for like for my course that I'm doing, my counselling at the minute, because I always think of from the biblical point of view, you know, I am that I am. It's like the most powerful statement. It's the epicenter of the present. It is the divine is this right now, here in this moment. It's the I am. So it's a declaration of what you are. And when you think about the things that you say, I am sick, I am like skint, you know, I have no money, or I am skint, I am, you know, sad. Like, I mean, I love that about the Irish language. Do you know what I'm talking about? How in the Irish language, you know, if you're sad, the translation isn't I am sad, it is sadness is upon me. It's like something that you wear. It's not intrinsically who you are. So emotions are things that come and go. You know, they are not us. They are a part of what comes and goes in our lives. It's fluid, you know, the energy of emotion. But I love that. I just think it's really important to state, because there is often we disconnect the mind from the rest of the body, you know. And neuro-linguistic programming is very much about the mind, but it's not just like the word that you use is anchoring. It's anchoring it in the physical felt state, because every emotion, energy in motion, it starts a thought, creates a chemical reaction in the brain, that generates the emotion then in the body. It's a felt physical thing. It's not a thought, it's a feeling. Do you know what I mean? So when you change the thought, you change the feeling. It changes all the chemical reaction in the body. Because we do live in a world, I mean, it's got a lot better, as I'm sure you'll agree, that we used to put the mind separate from the body. And I think, well, I don't think I know and feel it, that part of how Stephanie and I became friends is this, we resonated so deeply in relation to marrying the mind and the body. So both of us have an academic training background, and that's very much the mind. And both of us with the holistic work is very much the body, energetic as well as emotion body. It's like bringing the two worlds together, because, I mean, the mind lives in the body. It's not separate.
That's it. We're interconnected.
Yeah.
And we're always communicating. You know, when you might have a thought, and again, talking about that chemical sort of response, well, then if you've got a big dose of adrenaline or a big dose of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, then you might have moved on to a different thought, but that actual hormone is still resonating through your body. It's still having an impact on your organs. It's still having an impact on how you move and perceive in that moment, in that hour, in that day. So again, just being more, say, mindful, but again, I suppose anchoring is a good word to use, or grounding, but just again to come back to right now. So right now, how do I feel? I suppose that will bring me on to my kind of next thing that I'm really into.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, this actually leads very well into the practice that you are currently
so
working.
Another practice that I really enjoy is emotional freedom technique. So in terms of emotional freedom technique, we have a number of different, we have many meridian points throughout our body system, but for emotional freedom technique, the classic emotional freedom technique is that we have we have a point at the side of our hand. So sorry. And that's a karate chop point. So if you just imagine now, if you just so again, if anyone's listening, then just listen to what I'm saying, and if you can see, then you can see what I'm doing. But what we just do is we're just going to tap on the side of our hand, and we're going to start off with our setting up statement. And our setting up statement is, even though and whatever it is that's going on, even though I'm really stressed about being on this podcast,
even though I'm really excited about being on this podcast,
I love and accept myself.
I love and accept myself.
And we're just going to keep doing that, and we're going to repeat that same statement. So that's our setting up statement, okay? And so that we're doing that in the credit point of our left hand, or it could be your right hand, but I'm right-handed, so it makes sense.
And I'm left-handed, so it's the other way.
We're doing it with dual. So yeah. So again, and what you'll start to feel then in terms of that turning on is what we're doing is we're moving into the limbic system, into the amygdala, into the stress response in our brain, and what we're saying is, okay, hang on. I acknowledge the stress that's inside me right now. So then the next thing we move to is the eyebrow point. So that is up here. So just on your inner eyebrow, and you're just going to tap.
Kind of in the, like at the very beginning of your eyebrow, just above your nose. Yeah.
So we're just going to tap. And then here we can just tap, or we can start to say, like, I've never spoken a microphone before.
I've never spoken on a microphone before.
Okay. And we're just going to tap for a wee minute. And again, we're just turning on that meridian. And then we're going to move now to the side of the eye. So just, and we're going to tap.
On the bone?
Yeah. And we're tapping out. And again, this, you could just say, my name's Stephanie.
My name's Ruth.
And we're just tapping, and you'll start to feel a wee vibration coming through as we do that. And again, if we were doing this in session properly, we'd be having lovely deep breaths, and our eyes would be closed, and we'd be so focused. Then we move then to under our eyes. So this is our kidney meridian. In our face, and we're just going to give again the adrenal glands a wee flush, and we're just going to tap out here, and again you can say, I am wonderful.
I am wonderful.
I am very capable of speaking.
I am very capable of speaking.
Whatever it is. So you're just going to tap that out, because again, I identified my fear as being on the podcast in terms of speaking on the microphone. So that would make sense now for this release, that I'm just going to tap that out. Okay. The next point is under our nose, so between our nose and our lip. And we're just going to tap. I'm going to say, everything's okay.
Everything's okay.
Everything's okay, Stephanie.
Everything's okay, Ruth.
And then we're going to go under our lip, between our chin and our lip. Say, I've got you.
I've got you.
We're just going to tap out that. So, and again, feel that in your body. Allow the oxytocin, allow the serotonin to really take over. I've got you. On your best day, I've got you. On your worst day, I've got you. And we're tapping.
I hope all the listeners are doing this alongside us.
And then now down into your collarbone.
Okay.
So with your with your two hands.
Two hands on the two bones of the collarbone, okay.
And we're just tapping that out. And we're going to say something else lovely. So now I'm just going to say I am. And I want you to fill in your bit. So I am whatever feels good.
I am powerful.
Yes, I am. Tapping, tapping. Beautiful.
What about you?
I am still nervous, but less nervous.
Powerful affirmation next step. Come on now. Come on.
I am outstanding.
You are.
Yeah, love that.
Love it.
And then now we're going to move down to just where the side of a bra strap. So
okay. And so for the guys, kind of the, like just at the top of your ribs.
Yeah. So if you imagine where your nipples kind of come out.
Okay.
And then just go around to the sides. We're just going to hit that part.
Okay.
Okay. And we're just turning on that meridian.
So just for those who are listening or watching and don't know what meridians are, and I know if you've came in at this point in the episode, you're like, what are they doing?
Yeah, having a great time.
What are meridians? Just can you explain that?
So meridians are something that like essentially we use within Chinese medicine, and when we think about sort of the energy body, so we think about balance. What happens with meridians is that every point in your body is connected. So we know that we have like our brain, our eyes, our nose here, but actually what we have is different meridians throughout the body. So what we're doing in terms of tapping is we're turning on our heart meridian, we're turning on our liver, so all the things that we would need to actually give where the chemicals, where the toxins, where the hormones are going in our body system a flush. That's what we're doing with meridians. So if you're interested in acupuncture and the acupuncturist puts a needle in, they're turning on a meridian.
Right.
And that meridian will turn on for 10 minutes with the needle, and then the remainder of the session is about the body going into relaxation. When we're engaging in this tapping sequence, it's the same thing. We're saying, I'm turning these meridians on
To flush.
And then so let's keep going. So then just the top of your head,
Okay.
the very top of your head, like the crown of your head,
Yeah.
and we're going to tap and say all is well.
All is well. I love this one because I just think of a beam of light entering my brow. My crown.
And this is where, like, again, if you have any stress or any kind of low mood or anything, this is a really good meridian just to hit on. Again, if you think about yourself as a pressure cooker, this is where now we're just saying, come on out now. Let's just leave that body.
Volcano out the top.
Yeah. And so we do that sequence. So that sequence, so setting up statement is, even though whatever it is, I love and you always end with I love and accept myself.
Okay.
And then you go through the sequence, so those wee moves, and you had 7 times. So this could take about 10 minutes. Again, if you were in a therapeutic session, you might do a lot more. You may be working through something very specific. And so therefore then the affirmations and the release would all be based on what came in through the assessment. And then what you're doing is you're allowing your body then to go into a deep state of relaxation, and also expect then afterward that if we're releasing from the body system, then that's going to come out through, again, it's going to come out through wind, it's going to come out through, so that might be like excessive burping, it might be
your bowel movements, your urine.
And you can see it, you'll see the chemicals leaving your body, and so it's a really, really effective technique to use, and again, that's the kind of things that I teach my nieces and nephews. So when they go into school, like they don't say the words, they think the words, and they know it, and they'll just sit and they'll hit the side of the table, or they'll hit, and nobody knows what they're doing. But actually they're engaging in really good practices, because if they're anxious about sports day, if they're anxious about a spelling test, if they're stressed about, like they're playing team games or whatever that is, that actually like that we're embedding that, I embed that tool in them from the start. So actually the process of being in school, the process of challenge, the process of teamwork is actually a lot less scary. And then again, just going back to what I was saying about sort of the limbic system and the amygdala, we move back into that beautiful higher functioning human brain. So problem solving, critical thinking, rational thinking, all of that
out of the fight or flight stress
is turned back on.
I love that. And that's the perfect marrying of mind and body and soul, because you're physically feeling that, like it's a physical, a somatic, you know, you're feeling it viscerally through your whole being, but you're also consciously connecting what you're feeling with what you're thinking and reprogramming it, really, aren't you? Yeah.
And then I suppose then sort of the third modality that I want to talk about on this podcast is around Havening and Havening touch. And so Havening is a form of psychotherapy that uses sort of the meridian points. It uses touch therapy, and what we do is we move into, it's really effective for stress, it's really effective for anxiety, depression. It's really effective for a range of different sort of conditions. But so you can go onto the havening.org website, and then you can see the full list of everyone who is trained across the world, and you can get an idea of their, again, in terms of the background, you have to have a therapeutic background, so you can't just train in this modality without it. You have to be registered with the organisation, and then you can see a full bio of what that person is, what do they specialise in, and again, this can be done remotely or it can be done in person. So Havening Touch is a beautiful touch therapy. So it is either self-directed touch or it is a touch that you can administer to the person. Again, if the person is under 18, then we need parental consent, and as in terms of risk assessment, that is something that I would have the parents in for the session, because again, you're touching the person. So where we touch,
thank you, you just take the words right out of my mouth, because you say touch and people will be like, touch? Where's she touching? Where?
So again, very safe places. And so
yes.
You're
fully dressed.
You're fully dressed.
Before we go into explaining the session, might I just interrupt you and ask, where did Havening come from? Who created it? What is Havening? Because people hear EFT is kind of out there now, you know, social media, Instagram, Reiki. If you don't know what Reiki is, folks, it's an energy healing modality. And it's quite common as well. There, you know, it's quite a common one. IET is becoming more common as well. But Havening to me is kind of new. You know, it's newer, and a lot of people may not have heard of it. So, can you explain? I know you explained what it is, but where did it come from?
So it's a reasonably new modality, and it came from Dr. Rutten. So he has done like a serious body of research. He has studied like brain imaging, and again, this has all been evidence based in terms of the testing of this. It depends again where you look, but Paul McKenna, so the hypnotherapist, has also had a sort of, I would say, he's been in terms of the evolution of Havening Touch.
So he's part of the development process of Havening. Okay.
Yeah. But it was Dr. Rutten was the first person who ever created it, and it was based on the fact that in terms of neuroplasticity, what they were finding was that when we are in therapy, using different therapies, that sometimes people can get stuck in story. And when we get stuck in story, what we do is we traumatize the body further. So if I'm sitting here and I'm telling you about, like, my daddy passing away, and I experienced that, if I keep telling you that and keep telling you that and keep telling you, but I don't actually have the tools or the techniques, or I can't move that through my body, or maybe my body's not ready, or maybe my mind's not ready, well, actually what we do with Havening Touch is we apply a touch method. So we go to the trauma. So I could again say that trauma that happened with me and my daddy, or whatever trauma that has happened. It could be that you hit your leg against like a table and it hurt. That could be the trauma. So it could be big traumas, wee traumas, all kinds of trauma. So what we do then is we bring the person, so we sort of do a wee bit of meditation, a wee bit of relaxation, bring them back into their body. And then what we do is we say, okay, so why are you here? So it's client-led, and they will either verbally tell you what's going on, or they will think what's going on. But what you want to do as a practitioner is, what you're looking for is the changes in the eye. We're looking at the way that the eyes are moving. We're looking at the breath. So again, has there been a change in terms of the physiology of the body? And is there a change in terms of the flush of the skin? And whenever that person, and what we want to do is we want to say, okay, I want you to imagine that you can see it. I want you to feel it. I want you to smell it, touch it. We're really engaging all those sort of mindful five senses into the experience. And when that person is at the peak, then we ask them to score. It's going to scale 1 to 10. How much is this affecting you? And they will scale it. And we say, okay, that's great. Now we're going to apply Havening Touch. So what we do then is we'll bring them into that state. They will remain in that state for no longer than 2 minutes. Okay, so again, it's not an hour-long session where we're going to talk about trauma. We're jumping into it for 2 minutes, we're scoring it, then we're parking it, and then we move into the touch. And so the touch therapy is where, and I call it the mother touch. So if you imagine the way that a mother would caress a small baby, where she's running her hands across the forehead.
Nourishing touch.
Yeah, nurturing, touching the cheeks and running it down the side of the mouth. So again, just really, really soft, really gentle. And that's one of the applications of Havening touch. The other one is where we put our hands on our shoulders, and with a light pressure, but still pressure, we push down through the arms, across the hands, and just repeat that motion. Okay, so push down your shoulders, down your arms, across the palms of your hand, and what we do is we build up a process of getting that person into a rhythmic state.
And does the client do that, or would you be doing that?
Well, again, it depends on the client. So, whereas a child, I will mirror them. So I will sit in front of them and I'll do it and I'll say, copy me to get, and then once we're in rapport, what happens is that they'll change the way that they touch. The speed will change, the intensity will change, but as a practitioner, I will match that. Again, in terms of being the practitioner applying the touch, you will obviously ask consent. You'll, make sure your hands are clean and all, because you're going to be quite close to the person. But again, and then you demonstrate the touch, and then you apply the touch before you start the session. Then ask, what are they comfortable with? Some people love their faces getting touched, some people do not. Some people really like just the tops of their arms and their shoulders. Again, so it's about negotiating that, working that out, because consent is a really important part of this.
Of course.
And so when we're applying the touch, then what we do is we use distraction techniques, and those distraction techniques can be where we ask like really obscure questions to completely sort of take your mind away from the trauma. It could be that we bring you to a lovely place. So what we're wanting to do is, again, really sort of flood your blood and your body system with really great things. So it could be like what you love to eat, your favourite holiday, your favourite person. Could be anything. We can also use outcome havening. So something might be coming up and you might be really stressed about a job interview coming up and it's really affecting you on a 9. And then what we can do is we can fast forward and imagine you've got the job. Imagine you're in the role. Imagine.
Love that.
And then what we're doing is, and then we'll take you into the future. And so what we're doing is we're creating, through neuroplasticity, is we're creating a neural pathway in the brain. So rather than being a trauma point, we move into a point of, wow, I can do this. Yes, I'm successful. We could do it for affirmation. So if you've, again, where you're really struggling to believe in yourself, we might then get really specific affirmations. And then we start to move that through. We might use informational havening. So what we do then is just like similar to NLP, where I'm asking you questions. Well, imagine, and you're then thinking, well, this is the worst thing could happen, but imagine if all these great things happened. Imagine I had whatever it is.
So you're anchoring the positive into the body.
Yeah, and we're doing that for a 7 to 9 minute set. And then again, you're reading the person.
7 to 9.
7 to 9
Not
minutes.
79.
No,
It's
no.
like, what's 79?
7 to 9 minutes in a set.
Yeah.
And then what we want to do then is then we drop back in to the body. We go back to the trauma point or the issue that's happening, and we get the person to come back into the feeling, to come back into the senses, come back into, okay, so where are you feeling it now? And what tends to happen in session is that all of a sudden a person is feeling it. They're feeling it in their chest, they're feeling it in their back, they're feeling it in their neck, they're feeling it in their tummy, wherever that person feels it. And very quickly, maybe after, they're like, I still feel it, but it's less.
Yeah.
And then what we do is we go, okay, that's great. Now score it on a 1 to 10. Is it the same? Because it might be more, it might be less. And then what we do is we go back in to use the havening. So we apply the touch and we use the like psychotherapy talking techniques, and we're engaging in all of these lovely things. And what happens is very quickly in a session, somebody's like, that felt really heavy to me, but you know what? I remember that, but I remember like it feels like
Long ago.
it feels like it's sitting over there, like across the road,
Far away.
and now it's not in the body. Now it's not causing stress on the body. It's not creating stress in the brain. And what happens in terms of the science behind it is what we do is we trigger the synapses that are involved in the trauma, which is the recall. We're bringing in the feelings. We're completely activating that amygdala. We're like, come on, let's
bring
get
them
fully,
right back into the moment.
into the trauma.
Yeah.
And then what we want to do then is we want to take that, and we use then the touch, which then floods the body system with beautiful delta waves. So we're actually using your body's own healing system then with the touch. And what happens is that rather than it being a synapse of trauma, we dissolve the trauma point. So from the memory to the trauma in the brain, what happens is that the deposits start to dissolve, and we create new pathways to things that are more pleasurable, things that are more appropriate, and things that are safer for you to feel. And it's a really beautiful way. Again,
it's very soft and gentle. I have to just say, folks, I actually have received Havening from Stephanie, and it is a bizarre experience, because you're very in your body, and then you're very out of your body, and then you're very in your body. It's very peculiar. But I definitely, if you recall our session, what I was carrying that was a 10 for me when I went in was like a 2 when I left. It was just so... It's bizarre. It's a very bizarre thing, because it is that, like, I felt like you tripped my brain up so many times. It's like, we're talking just like, do you know what it's like? It's like going to the hairdresser, I know, and they'd be like, well, where are you up? Tell us about the week. What did you do that was lovely at the weekend? I remember you asking me that and being like, what are we talking about? And then getting invested in that, and then you just bringing it straight back into where I was. And I was like, oh, okay. It like I say, very unique, but really powerful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And again, like, your mind will go where it can go. Your body will feel as much as it can feel. And again, in terms of reading both, like, I mean, that's obviously why you have to have like a clinical background to start the training. But what's really interesting is that, again, you could be telling me, I'm a 10, but your physiology has completely changed. Your state has completely changed. So it's a really good one as a, in terms of trauma release, as a therapist, that the person doesn't even need to speak. Like, I've had sessions with clients where they've come in and I have, like, again, obviously, like, went through all the steps that I spoke to you about there now, about getting consent and applying the touch, and is it going to be self-directed touch, or is it going to be mirror touch, or whatever, and then they don't want to talk about the thing out loud. They don't want to know, and that is totally okay. And it's one of those therapies where I can ask the questions, I can use my skills, and they don't even have to say a word, but actually it's working, because as long...
You're reading the body, aren't you?
Yeah. And as long as they are having the thoughts, as long as they are following the steps in terms of the session, and the sessions can last anywhere between 45 minutes to 90 minutes. And again, it's really interesting how the body remembers. So I might be here because I know whenever I was training and had to do so many sessions, and like, it's funny, like, I'm here because of this reason, and then by the end of it I'm like, oh, that wasn't the thing that was annoying me, but actually, and then maybe halfway through the session, the thing that was the actual trauma, the actual point of stress, has now made itself known, and we can start working on that. Or if not, then the next session, it's like, right, we'll pick up there. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know why I love it? I feel it'll be useful. Hopefully it'll be useful there's so many things you've given me, Steph, that have given us all, that will be useful, like, to take away from. But I'm studying my counselling at the minute to become a counsellor, because it's just, again, there's a therapeutic element to the work that I do, talking therapy. My hair keeps falling on my face, it's doing my head on. There's a therapeutic angle to it, and, like, yes, I've had training in lots of different modalities, and this is part of the training, but for me, being me, and for the purposes of what we've been talking about, I just like the fact that I will have evidence to show that I've done the work in a therapeutic model that is talking therapy, you know, because it is very different, and it's a very different framework, and I love that. I'm all about safety, and something that keeps coming up a lot with clients that I've talked to, and in the counselling setting, is that there are people who go to counselling and they go for years and years and years, and then or they've been referred in by an external agency into a counselling service, and they're in the throes of of it. You know, I talked about in a previous episode that you're going through it, and sometimes going through it is not the time to be going and talking to somebody because you're already in it.
Yeah.
So they might go when they're going through it, and then they've came out the other side, and then they're going again because they're out the other side to process them going through it. And so by the end, there's like years of therapy and not feeling like they've ever gone beyond their story. And or they're like, I'm not going to another therapist because I have to tell my whole story all over again. And it's they are jaded with their story. And here's a piece of work that is, by the way, folks, it is so gentle. It is a really gentle therapy, if you know what I mean. And if you're somebody that's not a fan of touch, if you are somebody that's maybe because of your own experiences of trauma, you don't want body work, you don't want somebody, this is perfect. This is a perfect way to unpack something that you might be carrying. Or if you've been to a lot of different modalities around one particular story that you just can't seem to shift, I think this is a really, or not even think, I know and feel it in my whole being that is a really powerful offering.
Yeah, and that's the thing, again, it's grounded in the evidence. There is the neurological evidence in terms of the brain mapping. Like, again, that's the kind of things that excite me, because not only do I know how to apply the touch and the processes and the talking techniques, but actually there is a full body of evidence that you do not have to hold that trauma. That does not need to be dense. And like in terms of choice, because that's a big part of who I am. You know, some people need trauma. Some people need that in their story kit
for their identity. Yeah.
And some people don't. And if you're thinking, gosh, I want to release, let go, I want to process, I want to feel different. Again, it is gentle. Your body will not be able, your brain will not give you more than you can take. I suppose, and that's what I'm talking about in all of these therapies, and the same with psychotherapy, and the same with CBT. I mean, and we'll not talk about those because that's very mainstream, and lots of people are very aware of what those therapies are. But again, I think when you engage in like trauma release and you engage in therapeutic services, I think try them out, because you might be surprised. The thing that you don't think will work for you could be the thing that's perfect. And again, like sort of going back to the very start of my story, whenever like that initial lady had said like that she wanted to give me a treatment, and I was like, this is weird. I don't want to be this person who's in this clinical space, and then I present myself as like some kind of voodoo, like, you know, pseudoscience, you know, and then I felt it, and I was like, wow, this kind of and definitely does work. And then so I think that's a good point in terms of safety. Not all therapists are equal, and
that's true,
and not all therapists are the therapist for you.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing to note, that only because the person didn't work, only because the technique didn't work, it doesn't mean that you need to hold that.
Yes.
Because
and
it's ready
like,
to go. Because
sometimes too, people will discount something. They'll be like, oh, counseling's crap, for example, because they didn't gel with somebody. Like, do you give, you know, don't set, if you've had a negative experience of a therapy, please try another therapist, because sometimes it's not the therapy, it's the therapist, because like you said, not all therapists are equal. And there's another point I just wanted to make too in relation to different therapies, and even the likes of Havening. You said that, you know, you don't have to share the story, the person can go there. But really, like, any therapy will only work depending on how far you're willing to go. Like, I was speaking to a colleague, and they've started counselling, and they had been to counselling before, and it was many years before, and they were saying, like, I lied basically to my counsellor the whole way through that process, because they weren't ready, and they weren't ready to be there, and they were lying, but they knew they were lying, but they weren't consciously connecting that they were, if you know what I mean, because they just weren't ready. And the same with Havening. It's only going to work if you're ready for it to work. If you're ready to really go there and be like, right, okay, I'm going to feel this. I'm actually going to go in and feel this. Like, we can only, as therapists, only go as far as the client is feel safe to go. So, you know, it's that's why this work is lifelong, the healing journey. And, you know, because we're constantly peeling back the layers, aren't we? And finding new things. And like you said, you might come with one thing and be like, oh, right, actually, I feel safe now to actually dip into this whole well I didn't even know was there, which I love. Stephanie, you have given us so much information, so many resources. Like I always ask at the end, and I will still ask it, but I feel like you've given us so many already. But is there a quote or a saying or a practice that has been really illuminating for you in your own personal healing journey?
I think, so I suppose just, it's not really a quote, but I think what I'd like to share is that you have an entire book that is your life, and people come in and people go out. And I think the one thing that I've learned through my therapeutic work, through my life, through my own circumstances, that see, whenever someone leaves your life, that's okay. Don't hang on. Don't try and modify yourself for that person. Some people have just closed that chapter. But you have a beautiful life. And I think that's something, again, that sounds a wee bit silly to say, but I think, you know, as a woman, and I think as maybe I'm thinking about my younger self, where we try and try and try to be everything that everybody else wants, but actually you're perfect and whole as you are. And the people who want to be there will be there, and the people who have served their purpose in your life will exit out. And I think the most important thing in terms of my closure is to always just be authentic to yourself and be kind.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I as women, we're people pleasers, aren't we? Or some of us are anyway. I know I am. I know that you are. No, I love that. And it's only through really loving yourself that's just true self-love, understanding that you are enough as you are. And when you understand that, you understand how limitless your potential is, how that you don't have to change yourself. You already are everything that you need to be in this given moment. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for all of those different exercises. You're a wealth of information. I will be sharing in the show notes where you can find Stephanie, to work with Stephanie, and we'll drop some information about Havening and EFT and Reiki and IET, just because we've mentioned those practices here today. And we've got a different deck just to finish. Again, I shuffled and Steph pulled the card, and it's from the Sacred Cycles Oracle card deck. So this is specifically for the woman, and we pulled the follicular phase card, and it says I am unlimited potential. It's like right in there. As the bleeding phase recedes, the follicular phase steps in to bring a feeling of rejuvenation back into the sacred body. The gradual increase of estrogen helps reinvigorate and restore a sense of eagerness to begin a new exploration. This phase holds the promise of endless potential as a new cycle begins. You're encouraged to approach your current circumstances with openness. As a time when vital life force increases within the body, this phase represents the excitement that comes from realizing how many potential paths are available to you. The universe awaits you to choose where to anchor your energy. I love it. You're being asked to look ahead to the next phase of or cycle of your life and creatively, I can't say
Creatively.
Thank you. Craft a vision that aligns with your desires. The elixir of hope is alive within you now. It has the potential to guide your dreams to new heights as you dance with the divine in your chosen direction. And the journal prompt is, what am I currently co-creating with the universe? How might I expand the vision I have to greater heights? And I just love that as a card, because thank you for the elixir of hope that lives within you and all the practices that you have basically following the divine guidance into in your chosen path, because your path, like my own, has not been a straight trajectory. It's been a weaving of all these different things and people and gifts that we have received, and you've been one of those gifts in my life. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everybody for watching and tuning in and listening. And we hope the card pull was a bit of medicine and it arrived to you in your life in this moment as it has landed in your ears exactly when you needed it most. And that this was a bit of medicine for you today. Thank you all so much from my heart and womb to yours.
My heart and womb to yours.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.